Hello, how's it going? Good morning. I don't know if you guys can hear me or see me. Obviously, I'm not Quentin, and I don't do this on a regular basis. So if someone can just type in, like I can hear and see you. That there you go. I think you got it, William. Is that so? Is that correct? You can hear me and see me, okay? Sorry, I was having some issues about that. All right. Just want to kind of confirm that. Just if someone can just write in, I typed in that little chat there. If someone can just write, type in, they can hear me and see me. That'd be awesome. How's it going? Oh, I guess we're having some. We're still working okay here. And there's only looks like there's only one person on here. I just want to make sure make sure we're doing it right. Okay, perfect, great. Thanks, Touch. I appreciate that. All right. So then I'll just kind of go ahead and start with office hours and get to your guys' questions. Again, I'm Robin Rosado, Director of Instruction here for Top Speed Golf in Orlando. So typically during this time, I am giving in-person lessons and in-person lessons and running clinics. So give me 1 second. I just got a notification about here. Oh, okay, good. All right. So what I was saying there is typically I do give online in-person lessons in clinics, and so while Quentin's on vacation, I am covering for him, and we'll be kind of starting on in-person lessons here again shortly, hopefully this summer, and also clinics hopefully in the fall to winter time. Those are amazing. Those distance clinics. But what I am offering right now is the a 1 hour online lesson. So just like a golf lesson itself, I will be, through Zoom, we'll be conducting a lesson. And I've done a few of them already so far, and they've been actually a lot of fun and some of my first few ever. And actually pretty good success as well. So if you want to just go, there's a link above here on the page. If you want to click on that, that'll kind of direct you to the calendar. And if you want to just ask me more questions about it, Robin at topspeedgolf.com. All right, so I'll kind of get into it here and dive into your guys' questions. Again, hopefully that everyone can hear me and see me. There are a lot of questions coming in, but I haven't gotten any here in a little bit. So I just want to, again, just confirm that everything's working okay. So I will kind of get into some questions that were sent in prior to me starting. So John asked from a part of it yesterday, talked about the downswing, and we're talking about wide to narrow in relation to lag. So you may have heard that before in the past, that the term wide narrow, and I think move. Okay, so when you hear wide, a lot of people relate it to hand path or extension here into the backswing, and the club going further here, wider on the way back, trying to create a very wide circle here, arc. And it's the same thing going with the club head. And yes, that is true when it comes to our backswing. Now, the one thing what I was getting at yesterday, a lot of people do is on the narrow parts, they're going wide to then narrow here onto the way down. On the narrow part, what a lot of people do for lag is they'll start pulling down on the handle. So if you ever heard that term before, in essence, we want to pull down. Well, what happens there is that handle, let me grab something here real quick. So if I'm pulling down on this handle like this straight down, what happens is the momentum and the physics of this handle going this way, you can notice how the club head wants to work this way. So we're somewhat casting the club a little bit, or we're fighting a cast if you pull straight down for lag. So the narrow part into the downswing when it comes to lag is actually the club head itself. So the club is getting wide on the way back, really big wide arc. And on the way down, the club head itself narrows. So this would be, imagine the tip of that alignment stick is my club head. So this narrows. But if you notice what I'm doing here with my hand to narrow that angle, my hands are actually still staying wide. So it's not doing, so I'm not going here and then down. I'm going here and I'm almost pulling away from me. So you notice if I pull away, pulling away, this motion here is narrowing the angle of my club. So that was the question from yesterday as far as the proper wide, narrow, uh, I guess saying that people say is that it's not what the hands are doing or the arm path are doing. It's actually what the club head path is doing. And the club head is the part that's narrowing. We're still staying wide with our arms and our hands in our downswing, but the club head itself is the part that's narrowing. So on the website, as I was saying yesterday on the website, that talks to the bow and arrow drill, where the bow and arrow drill, it's almost like we're pulling an arrow. If we had a quiver here, we're pulling an arrow out of that quiver. You can notice there, my hands are staying wide, or I'm pulling away from my body, and that helps me narrow that angle up there for lag. So hopefully that cleared it up there, John. All right, so hey, Bernhard, how's it going? Bernard, sorry. Let's go take a look here. I'm sorry, I'm going to the ones that were sent in prior to me starting. So Joseph asked, I was fitted for new irons that are 1 inch shorter than my old irons. I can use my old irons, or can I use my old irons to do drills without hitting the ball, or should I use the new irons? I'm trying to correct ball contact, fat and thin. Well, an inch is kind of significant when it comes to the club shaft, and so I would actually practice or use your new irons. I wouldn't really, because one, you get to get used to it. There's so much feel and so much adaptation that you have to do, and of course that's going to make a big difference when it comes to swing speed. That's a big difference when it comes to just the overall length of your swing. So I would definitely use the new ones if you were fitted. So if I think you said the new ones were an inch shorter than your old ones, I would definitely use it, especially if you're fitted. And always recommend getting fitted, and recommend going to a good fitter like Club Champion, or I can't remember the one that's similar to Club Champion that we also had, True Spec. Those type of places that are solely fitting studios, and there's a lot of smaller ones. Like we have our friends over in Virginia, Swing Fit Studios. John over there is an awesome guy, and he has a custom fitting studio, and he's been doing a lot of custom work. So so I would always recommend getting fitted, but definitely use your new irons for sure. Okay. So Steve asked, at setup, my shoulders are open. Any suggestions on how to fix this? Well, one thing that I would suggest is that when you're setting up to the golf ball, let me see here. I want to try to get into a stance here, and hopefully I don't have much room, so I apologize. Not like Q's office is set up for it. So if I'm setting up to it, so now you're looking, if I'm hitting the ball in this direction, what I see a lot of people do before they take the club back and they'll look at the target is they'll go like this. So see how I'm kind of popping up out of my posture, and I'm almost opening my shoulders up. And I see that actually it's very common. I see it with a lot of players. So when you're sitting up to the ball and you're getting ready to hit it here, right before you take it away, don't pop up to look at your target. Make sure you just look down the line this one. You'll notice you'll probably end up feeling like, oh, my shoulders are a little bit open. You'll kind of see down the target line. You'll see more down your shoulder line instead of opening up. So pay attention to that. If you're doing that when you look at your target prior to hitting the golf ball, if you rise up and look this way, because I see that a lot. So making sure that we are staying to our posture, making sure we are just, in essence, looking right down the line to ensure that we're doing it properly. All right, so that was a good question. Was that, again, I see that more often than I thought I would with that. So that's really good. Okay. Steve, you also asked, it appears lag requires a good wrist hinge. I have a good backswing, but at the top, I cannot get much wrist cock, which inhibits getting good lag. I do agree, there is a point where we do need a certain amount of mobility in our wrists in order for us to get a good amount of lag or to even shallow the club. So, Steve, one thing I would actually look at for you is to look to see how you are shallow in the club. One thing that does help, so we talk about lag, and when we're looking at lag, we look for more on the face-on angle, right? So if the coach is sitting right here in front of you, facing your chest, he's looking this way, that's when we're looking for lag. And for those who don't know, we measure max angle of lag roughly when the left arm is parallel to the ground. Now, so let me grab this alignment stick again. There is a certain point of, so when lag, typically it's measured through, we call radial deviation wrist set. So that is simply just thumbs up, this motion here. Now, if I do it properly, if I'm gonna look here from this angle, so see how my wrist is flat to my forearm, if I check it, that's what we need to do is make sure that the left wrist is flatter. So we don't cup it or don't even get flexed, nice and flat here, and check your mobility. And more than likely, you're not gonna be able to get past a 90-degree angle here with the club shaft and lead forearm here if you do it properly. Now I can kind of cheat and I'll cut my left wrist, create extension, so you can see it gave me a little bit more. Now I can actually bow my left wrist, and now actually that gives me even that much more. So now you see that from here, I actually have a pretty good amount, and this isn't even really that bow, that's pretty flat, right? And so you can see that this angle here now is a lot more narrow on the way down. And if I combine that now with right hand extension, so I'm shallow in the club in essence, so I keep hitting my wall. You can see that now I have a lot more lag there onto the way down. So I would look into that. If you find yourself that or radial deviation, as far as a wrist set is concerned, there's a mobility factor. Make sure that you're shallow in the club. Make sure that we are creating flexion here into the lead wrist, extension there into the right hand in your downswing. You should, looking from a face-on view, when you video yourself, you should have more lag. Now, ideally, we do want a shallow club prior in order for us to get lag there onto the way down. But there is a point of mobility. I kind of showed this, I demonstrated this yesterday for myself personally. If you look at my left wrist here in comparison to my right wrist, you can see I have a lot more mobility there in my, well, it's not a ton, but you can see I have a lot more mobility there in my right wrist. So then it is difficult for me to shallow the club, trying to bow out my lead wrist there onto the way down. So that was a good question there, Steve. John asks, I have some neural pathway in my right preventing me from raising up on my right toe. I find it difficult to X factor weight to the left side. How can I compensate for this? So assuming if I understand your question correctly there, John, that you just right now you can't in essence push off with your right foot into your downswing. Again, that's my interpretation of it, and forgive me if I'm wrong there. So that's preventing you to kind of transfer your weight to your lead side, and you're kind of hanging back there. And so, what is it that what will help you? One first thing here, John, what I would say is think about ground pressure here at address. And yeah, I mean, it's completely fine to have our feet completely even as far as weight at address. I will say though that PGA Tour average is about 54% more weight pressure into the lead side in comparison to the trail side at the address position. So that might already just kind of help you out as far as just having a little bit more pressure into the lead side. Why is that the case though? A lot of times they say that it helps them push back into their backswing and load up, and on the way down, it allows them to help them feel like they can get back to their lead side. So that's the first thing I would try. Second thing, because it does sound like, I mean, you said neuro, so it's more like, I guess, muscle memory type deal, or actually might be maybe a nerve thing that where you can't push off the right foot. I mean, to somewhat compensate, because we do need to be rotating open, right? And weight transfer and ground pressure is a big factor into that. You may have to just either flare out your lead foot quite a bit, or even open up your stance in that lead side, so then that it's kind of like cheating to helping you rotate open and get that lower body more out of the way. If it's more of a an actual physicality thing that's preventing you from pushing up. But it does sound like it's more of a neuro, as you said. So yeah, those are the two things I would recommend. Other than that, I think the thing that's going to help you out the most, and also, by the way, narrowing. I know it sounds crazy, but narrowing your stance, because I mean, just like we would in chipping, not that narrow, but if you narrow the stance up just a little bit more, again, this is all really relative to your swing, right? That helps you also rotate, and it helps you get a little bit more of your knees more flexible in the swing. So take a look at that there, John, if it's more of a stance thing there to address. All right, so Kenneth asks, where are your hands at the top of the backswing? In front of the trail shoulder, even with with that shoulder, or behind the shoulder? So Kenneth is asking into the backswing here. So if I'm going here to the very top of my swing, where's I think you said both hands, just hands in general, right? Yeah, where are your hands? So are my hands in line with my trail shoulder here, in front of it, or behind it? So, it's all really relative, on top speed golf, that's not really the location of the hands at the very top, is not like a main priority, because you see so many players with different things. Like look at Matt Kuchar and Charlie Hoffman and Ricky Fowler, where their hands are going to be a little bit more behind their trail shoulder there. Look like Justin Thomas, Matt Wolf on a really extreme example, and Jim Furyk, where their hands are more, maybe slightly more in front of the trail shoulder. Most guys, I guess you can say, are going to be almost in line with the trail shoulder, and the hands getting higher there at the top. What I normally recommend, because getting the hands higher at the top is massively important, I think. And reason being is it's good for speed, but when we get the hands higher, so that would mean not behind the trail shoulder. That would mean at minimum, pretty much in line to kind of in front. So I'm normally, for me personally, I'm right. So if I take my trail shoulder here, the position on top of my swing now, where I used to be more of a flat plane swinger, now my position is going to be more, I would say, front part of my right shoulder. And that's just me personally. And that's where you do see, if you look at, or I'll pull up some examples right now, that where you see a lot of tour players at these days, where kind of a flatter plane swing is not really that popular, I guess you can say. I'll pull up Billy Horschel's swing here, and you'll kind of see for him, his hands are going to be still in line with trail shoulder, to even being kind of, I was saying for me, kind of the front part here of this trail shoulder. So I don't know if you can see this at all. I know the mic camera isn't all that great, but you can kind of see there with him, location of, let me draw a line here. So middle of the hands are going to be pretty much right in line with the shoulders there, with that trail shoulder, as you're saying there, Kenneth. So see that there. So that is going to be pretty standard that we'll see. Again, it doesn't, on the site, doesn't really matter. If you look at Charlie Hoffman, and I think I have a Charlie Hoffman video here, that his are going to be on a more flatter plane. So the main thing, as long as we're getting a good full turn. Yeah, you can see here with Charlie. See there, his right there. So they're more back behind. So that would be behind that trail shoulder. So yeah, I mean, as long as we're still getting the good full turn, and as long as we're still shelling the club on the way down and generating lag, then the top of the backswing doesn't really matter so much. But if you're looking for speed, if you're looking for, shallowing the club more, lag, then I do recommend to get the hands higher at the top. So that would be, more in line with that trail shoulder. And that just generates a lot more room for shallowing, lag, and speed. So that's a good question there, Kenneth. It really was. That was awesome. Let's go take a look here. Let's take a couple other ones. Robert says, I watch slow-mo of a lot of pros and see them squat down a bit and bend their chest over the ball a lot as they transition into their downswing. Then just before impact with the ball, they violently push their left leg straight, whip the club at the ball. Reminiscent of the dip flip Byron Nelson always made. I don't see Clay Ballard doing it. Should we do it or avoid? So let me talk to a couple of things here, Robert. One is going to be on average. So whatever knee flex tour players have at address. So let's say, they're at 130 degrees of knee flex here. On the way down, on average, on the PGA Tour, it's about a 10-degree more of knee flex this way into the downswing. So we're applying pressure, getting athletic. So just like if you're trying to jump straight up into the air, what you would do is you would bend your knees, right, get lower to the ground technically, and explode up. And that's kind of to your next point. That explode up is more of our lead side or left side for most, where the left knee is beginning to straighten out, left hip is beginning to rotate open, and left shoulder is beginning to rotate open. So right now, simply to your question, yeah, I mean, we definitely, if we have proper sequencing going on into the downswing, so that's more legs first, technically ground, applying pressure to the lead side first, and then rotating up. If we have that, then yes, there should be a little bit of flex there onto the way down. There's plenty of guys who don't do that on tour a lot, where they don't have a lot of knee flex. Again, going to like Matt Kuchar, going to Jim Furyk, there's not a ton. Those guys don't really hit it a long ways either. But for the most part, almost everybody, you're going to see a little bit of kind of sit down. Now, Clay does do that in his swing. If you look at his swing, there should be. I mean, I've known him for years, and I've seen his swing hundreds of times and in person. And I know for sure that is one thing, that he does feel as far as a transition is kind of a sitting back motion there with the glutes, a little bit of pressure there into the lead side. And in turn, yes, that takes the upper body spine to where it does kind of crunch. So imagine if this is this here, like my hip joint or glutes, and this is my quad muscle here, and this is my spine into the downswing. It is kind of this motion here on the way down a tiny bit. And that's why you see, actually, if you look from a down the line view, you do see the head move for every player, just a tiny bit there onto the way down. So again, going back to, it's not, again, it varies. I said 10 degrees is average. Some guys you see it more, some guys you see it less, or it might be a couple degrees. But yeah, for the most part, every player is going to be kind of squatting there into the way down, lowering the legs, and then in essence that takes the spine and does lower it just a little bit. And that's what's helping us maintain to our posture, because to your point, yeah, we are then now straightening and kind of straightening the lead side there on the way prior, just pretty much right at impact, and that's where you hear kind of posting up. So if you look here, I'm going to show you with Billy Horschel, since I have him kind of laid out. So you can see here. Sorry, give me 1 second. Just drawing a couple lines. So we see Billy here at address. There's his, so that says 115 degrees there with that angle, and I have that line there for his head. So if you look into the transition here into the way down, now he's pretty neutral. Like, I will say that he's very neutral with his spine, but and his knees do flex a little bit more to where now it's going to be not a big change for him. I will say that not a big change. It's literally 1 degree of change, so it's about 114. But you can actually see here that his head is actually moved down a little bit more, and that's not because he's dipping down. I don't know if you can see where I drew the head there. See the space there now. Again, that is a little bit more knee flex there, so that's more knee flex than actual upper body for him. So in his case, like Brooks Koepka, you'll notice that angle really narrow with the chest there, getting in essence closer to the golf ball. For Billy here, and it is kind of how he's built. Like for me personally, I have a longer torso in relation to my legs, so I'm not going to go forward this way more into the downswing. My knees are going to flex more in that relation. That's where Billy is. His knee flex is more than the upper body, in essence, getting closer to there on the way down, and he's flexing his knees more. So it is relative as well to kind of how we're built in a way. But everyone's getting a little bit lower, and so by the time we get to impact, now we have lead side exploding up, and we need that ground pressure to help us rotate open. Like I said, kind of like if you're jumping into the air, you'll go lower and then jump, and that's what we're doing in the golf swing, except we're doing more lower here and then explode up, so our lead side's rotating up and back. So hopefully that answered your question there, John, as far as this. Oh, sorry, Robert, as far as kind kind of lowering, exploding, and then how that relates to rotating open. But Clay does definitely do that for sure. You might see it more in just into his legs and his knees than actually the upper body moving kind of in essence closer to the ball. And it's all really relative. Like I said, some guys are a couple degrees, some guys are more. So good question there, Robert. Thanks. Let's see here. All right, Billy here asks, in the downswing lag, which is first, the move halfway down or rotating the left hip? Oh, that's a really good question there, Billy. That's as far as a sequencing standpoint. So technically, if you want to think of a downswing, our downswing does technically start with an initial pressure here into the lead side. That energy is then transferring up kind of to our left knee. Then our left knee is kind of externally rotating. And then the left hip is beginning to rotate open. But on the same line, remember, our downswing starts before our backswing completes. That's ideal. So we are now starting to see through 3D motion. So by the way, sorry, is it Steve that you asked me that? Billy, sorry. When the move section, we're shallowing the club. So now we're starting to realize on tour that on average, the last 4% of the swing, players are actually shallowing the club slightly there at the very top. So what does that mean? If it's at the last 4% of the top of the backswing with the hands and they're shallowing the club, well, technically we should have already started our downswing into our lead side. So, or it might be at that exact same time. So as the backswing is completing here at the very top of the swing, I'm seeing that disassociation between lower body and upper body. So think of it here as if I'm going here to the very top and that last little bit, I should already see a little pressure here into the left foot, left knee, and then the left hips rotating open. At that point, the hands are probably, when the left hip is starting to rotate open, the hands should be already into their downswing, and the club should already be shallow at that point. And that's when you hear us on the site say we want to shallow the club early. But again, that's where you're seeing a lot of players now shallow the club there at the very top. So we discovered that, yes, tour players are actually shallowing the last 4%, while others are making it more obvious, like Dustin Johnson, whereas lead wrist is very, very bowed. He's been doing that his whole life. Brooks Koepka, you'll see lead wrist be very, very bowed there at the very, very top. Victor Hovland. So there's a lot of players who are doing that to where they are trying to get that club shallow there at the top. So pretty much what that does is kind of sets it and forgets it in a way. So when you have that shallow and you have it early, all you have to do is just kind of rotate. The club will shallow more. Don't get me wrong. It will shallow more on the way down because of momentum. So we're doing this motion. If I do this here and we go this way, right, on the way down, yeah, your legs are already driving. You kind of utilizing that momentum to help you do so. So to your point, then yes, technically the sequencing and downswing lower body goes first. Hips being rotated open, the club should already be. By the time the hips actually, you'll see an obvious. Maybe I should make that more clear there, Billy. When you see it more obvious of the hips rotating open, you should have already started the downswing with the arms and the hands. And by the way, the move section, the move halfway down. So the move section or shallow in the club, we need to do that earlier than halfway down into the downswing. That's literally with the arms and hands. The first thing that kind of happens, the club needs to shallow. Again, if we shallow the club too late, which I do see a lot on countless players, especially those who do draw the golf ball, is that they'll come down maybe a fraction too steep, and halfway down to the downswing, you realize that, well, I've got to start swinging into out, and I've got to do something. So now you're going to shallow the club later here into the way down this way. So you drop the club more back into the slot, and now that's leaving the face open. So it makes it difficult for us to rotate the hips out of the way. And then if the face is coming in open when we're shallowing the club too late, what are we then going to do? Well, we're going to feel that, right? And at the last minute, we're going to use our hands last second or too early. So then that's when you see, if we shallow the club late, typically what I see is blocks to the right as being a miss, overhooking being a miss, And if you get that timing right, it's going to be a pretty straight ball, maybe a little bit of a draw. So that's why it's always important when we do shallow the club. It is early into the downswing with the path of the arms and hands this way. But again, our lower body is starting the downswing first. All right, so that was a good question. Hopefully I kind of answered that for you there, Billy. So let's go. Steve asks, when our hip high, is there a difference in club face position in full swing versus pitching? So I'm assuming that when, into your backswing, let me go ahead and kind of get here and get some room. So you're saying that into the backswing, hip high here. So is there a difference in club face position between irons or full swing and chipping? Yeah, there is. There definitely is for sure. Where the club face in a more full swing is going to probably come in a little bit, not for everybody, but going to come in a little bit more open in relation to chipping now, or pitching, I should say. Now, for thinking just stock pitching, right? So if remember, like ideally, we want to be utilizing the bounce of the face. So when we utilize the bounce of the face, we're technically having the face a little bit more lofted, and that means a little bit more open there to dress. So also in that same note, that position there in the backswing or downswing when it comes to pitching, it's probably going to be open as well. So ideally in pitching, we are lining up a little bit left of target. Stance is a little bit more narrow, and we are exposing the bounce, and ideally you want to hit it with the bounce with shaft lean, but we're still adding loft to the face, certainly at address. So with that, probably means that our face is going to be more open at that point in relation to more of a full swing. So in a full swing, where we're kind of more square, square, square as we come in shallow club here on the way down. Ideally, we do not want to open the face. Ideally, we want that face to be super square. These days, we're not actually promoting more of a shut face now, or closed face, not shut, just a more closed face there into the downswing, because then all you can do is rotate open out of the way. So again, it is kind of relative in a way to where more modern instruction right now in the downswing, we are teaching the club face to be slightly more shut. And the reason being is that we can swing and rotate as hard as we can. We're going to generate more shaft lean. That means we're going to generate more ball speed that way, compress the ball better. And then also with rotating open, we're going to have a lot more consistency as far as dispersion is concerned. So, and then again, like I was saying there, versus pitching, where at address, we do have the face slightly open. Face is going to be a little bit open there in the backswing with that. And if you're going to expose the bounce, we're still generating shaft lean, but that face may be slightly open. And in pitching, just kind of talking really quick on tour players and what they're doing. I kind of mentioned this yesterday, from about 60 yards and in on average. So for those who are pretty familiar with launch monitors and club face in relation to, club path in relation to club face, that data. So average on PGA Tour is about 1 to 2 degrees of the club head path traveling left of target line. So of course we are rotated open. Don't get me wrong. We are set up open. So that means our club path is technically traveling on the same line as our alignment. But also their face is about in the range of about 2 to 3 degrees open there. Now this is from about 60 yards and in. So more of controlled wedges. Once it gets a little further, then that path gets really close to 0.0. So if you're about, we say distance wedges. So if you're swinging at in essence, a full swing wedge, tour players are almost slightly into out with the path. So they're swinging into out and the face being slightly closed. Now, again, this is average and they're not going to be more than like a degree into out really. So to that point, when I was saying there, when it comes to pitching, technically path is going a little bit left, face is getting a little bit more open. So they're kind of hitting cut chips or cut pitches into the green. And so that's helping them. One, it's giving you a pretty good amount of control. Like you're able to control a cut more than a draw into the green. You're getting a little bit more spin. So when you're doing that, as well as exposing the bounce and still generating shaft lean when it comes to pitching. So I would say, and that was a long-winded answer there, but to your question there, yes, it's I guess you can say the face is different when it comes to pitching and more of a full swing, especially now in modern day when we're trying to get as much spin as we can off a golf ball when it comes to wedges. And also with irons, we're trying in more full swing, we're trying to generate as much ball speed as we can. So these days it's more of a more de-lofted slash closed. It's barely closed, by the way. I mean, think like a degree is a matter of like a minute on the clock. So it's a de-lofted, slightly closed face as we rotate. So DJ is kind of like more of the over exaggeration motion of it. That's what's maximizing out the distance, but also the consistency factor with irons. So hopefully hopefully that made sense. That was a fairly long answer I gave you there. Eric, he goes, what technique can you use to attain loft in a bunker? Give me 1 second here. Sorry. Well, let me talk about kind of like some big things in bunker. Like, so I would say some basic actions that need to happen. One, face being open there at address. So, again, we're trying to expose the bounce there and utilize that to our advantage. But faces being open, that's like 100% got to be number one. And a close second is actually acceleration and speed. You'd be pretty surprised how fast you get to swing in just a normal greenside bunker. So a long time ago, a couple of years ago, Clay and I were in a greenside bunker doing some testing on kind of a standard greenside bunker, which is roughly about 15 yards is like kind of the standard greenside bunker length. And we found that to appropriately hit it out, so get it, good loft, a little bit of spin, and not hit too far back behind the ball. The kind of the rule of thumb there is like a couple inches behind the ball, obviously depending on sand, all that. So standard bunker shot, you got to be swinging about 70 miles per hour to do it right. And so that's pretty darn fast, where you see some guys, if you look at your driver's swings, and it's pretty common to where you guys are going to be average, I think is about 93 miles per hour for the average golfer. And so they measure the average golfer about a 14 to 15 handicap. So the average golfer is swinging about 93 miles per hour. So if you think like at a little 15-yard bunker shot, we have to swing at 70 miles per hour. That's pretty fast. So acceleration and speed is like another huge factor when it comes to normal bunker play. And that's definitely got to be a must, right? With the face being open there when we're utilizing the bounce. A couple other things, that are, I would say, put it second and third on a priority list is going to be make sure you don't have the ball position too far back into our stance. I see that a lot with people in the bunker. I think it's because they're trying to like hit down on the ball and get generate a lot of sand. If you put it too far back in your stance, that's going to cause you to come in too steep this way. And so that's when you see like divots getting like very deep down into the bunker. And then most of the time, those guys are the ones that struggle to just get out of the bunker or just barely even get out. Another same line, if you put it too far back in your stance to prevent the steep move, you're then going to maybe come up and flip it too much, and then you're catching it thin. So that's where thin and chunk are kind of the same thing, just a little bit different on the timing. So I typically play just kind of like a normal, I guess you could say, chip shot, but stance is going to be a little bit wider when it comes to bunker play. So it's kind of diagonal of instep of lead foot. So a little, I guess you can think of it as maybe a little bit above from middle. And again, that allows you to come in face spin open and comes in with the bounce, and your angle of it actually is pretty shallow. We don't want to come in too steep into the ball. It's pretty shallow. We're kind of using the bounce this way off the sand, and that's kind of popping the ball up, of course, with acceleration as well. And then the last thing, I would say, again, not as a necessarily priority, but this is where it is okay to slightly flip, right, the hands, because again, we need to utilize the bounce. So we need to keep the face open as long as we can. So where it is to have a little bit of a flip. So Clay did several videos on this, and this is what I kind of teach is when I'm doing a bunker play, I'm trying to feel like I'm folding up my arms and my wrists as early as I can into my follow through. Of course, acceleration, we do not want to decel when we're doing that, but we're coming through. I'm trying to fold my arms up, and that helps me kind of flip and leave the face open and expose that bounce there. So that's what I'd recommend. Other than just really putting in practice in, you'll have to understand, like, one, Quality of the sand is kind of an important thing. So if the sand is very, very wet, like us right now in Florida, where it's raining almost every day, so the sand's bunker plays are very wet. So you're not going to take a very deep divot. You're going to hit a little closer to the golf ball, and not in a very shallow divot. And that's why you can get a lot of spin off of wet sand. Very powdery sand, like you see on the beaches, like in the beach type golf courses, where it's very, very powdery. That's you'll probably swing a little bit faster. Not to say if you have to get further behind the ball, it's still more of a standard bunker play, but you will get more sand as far as a depth is concerned in your divot. So making sure that 100% that you're accelerating and swinging pretty fast. So it's scary at first. I will say that when it comes to bunker play and you're trying to really accelerate and you're trying to swing really fast, I get that for sure, and I see that a lot with lessons. It's just going to take some practice to trust that when you do swing pretty fast, and as long as you, again, we're exposing the bounce and we're kind of smacking the sand with that bounce, then it's going to be okay. And then from there, it's just understanding distance control, and that's simply going to come from practice once you get your technique down. So hopefully that answered your question there. Robert asks here, is there a better? So thanks, Eric, by the way. Is there a better type of grip? Overlap of the club, create, allow lag. As far as type of grip, when it comes to how our wrists are setting, no. There's no one that's actually better, whether it be overlap, interlock, or even 10 finger. But it is kind of important now when it comes to wrist set. So let's just hypothetically say if my left wrist is extremely weak, so my hands are very, very weak. So let me go ahead and, sorry, excuse me. Got my super speed stick here. So if my left hand is very weak on the club, so where if I'm even towards slightly bowed here at address, so I see like maybe one knuckle, it does lock up my wrist for flexion, right? So it kind of keeps that angle there, but it makes it difficult for me to, so if I straighten out my lead arm, I can't really, in essence, bend back my wrist for radial deviation wrist set. So it could limit lag there and also wrist set here throughout the swing. So if I'm too strong, that's more of this club face. If I'm too strong, then I can get a lot more lag here on the way down. That's sort of like DJ. He has a very, very strong grip here into his swing. But again, the only thing you're doing there, when you have an extremely strong grip, you'll have to kind of fight a little bit of a hook. That's why guys who have very, very strong grips are actually, I'm talking about tour-wise, they are more of a fader of the ball, I should say. And you'll notice them at impact. Those guys are a lot more open with their hips because they have to keep their hands quiet. And now their hands are, well ahead. And those guys are the ones that typically do hit the ball a lot further, but also are fairly straight for their speed. DJ, Brooks Koepka, Victor Hovland. But you look at Jordan Spieth, who has a very, very weak grip now. But again, ball striking wise isn't really his strength, and also distance isn't really his strength. So it's all kind of relative, but I do believe the grip itself. So as far as not necessarily the type of grip, but the grip itself, as far as strength is concerned, neutral to a little strong is just what I always recommend. You can play amazing golf with a more weak grip, but it's also for staying connected. I see a lot of separation sometimes where if I were looking more from the face-on angle here, I see a lot of players who have a lot of separation to the hands. I can see like the left thumb, so I like to feel nice and connected. So imagine this pocket here I'm creating in my right thumb here that's shooting right over my left thumb, so feeling nice and connected. And that allows me to have pretty good amount of connection and wrist set, but also control of the club, and allows me to shallow the club as well. So I personally use overlap, and I only did that because when I was a kid, I saw Tiger Woods doing it, and so I did it. So that's really personal. What feels best for you, I would say, when it comes to overlap, 10 finger, so baseball grip, or interlock. So that was good. Thanks, Robert. Tim asked, recently I started topping my 3-wood. Not sure what has changed. I've been hitting them both well until 2 to 3 weeks ago, Any ideas of what I may be doing wrong? Thanks, Tim. Um, so let me just talk quickly there, Tim. Obviously, everything's really personal, but the one thing that we do see a lot of when it comes to woods is concerned, a lot of players, you don't have to even be flipping, but a lot of players like to put it up into the air because I see like tour players get a lot of height on it. And so then they change something as far as maybe spine angle. So we're tilting more back, or simply you're coming up on the ball more. So your angle of attack, in essence. So think about like on TrackMan or any launch monitors that you see angle of attack, where your angle of attack now is a little bit up for a wood. And think about, so tour players, so angle of attack doesn't vary a ton in what people may think. So PGA Tour wise, a 7-iron is at a negative 4.3 angle down into the ball, negative 4.3. They're hitting down on it. A 3-wood is negative 2.3 on average on the PGA Tour. So there's only a 2-degree difference between a 7-iron and a 3-wood. Now, the reason why 3-wood technically, so that doesn't mean the swing changes. The swing does not change at all. But technically, the reason why it's not nearly as down as a 7-iron, and it's only 2 degrees, is simply ball position. All right. So if I have 7-iron, if I try to put it simply here, I don't have a lot of room here. So I have a 7-iron. It's right in the middle of my stance. Well, I guess I'll just do it without a club. Right in the middle of my stance, and I get to impact, and I have a ton of shaft lean here. Let me move this back a tiny bit. So I have a ton of shaft lean here for 7-iron, and it's, let's say, middle of my stance roughly. But if I move that further up in the stance, so I'm getting closer to my release point, I'm not going to have nearly as much shaft lean there because of the ball position, because it's further up, and I'm beginning to get into my full, what we call that straight line release. So what I'm saying is we're technically still hitting down with a 3-wood, but it's not a very steep motion, so just be careful of that. But we're definitely not hitting up on it with a 3-wood. Or any of our woods. And driver, to be honest with you, technically driver on the PGA Tour is actually -1. So there's plenty of guys. I mean, don't get me wrong, the longer hitters and the best players are hitting up on the ball, but there's plenty of guys who hit slightly down with their driver. That's a whole other subject as far as the reason why that's happening. But that when we hit down on it, we kind of create, those guys are very square with their face and path. And so that creates just a ball that's going backwards a little bit more backspin, but not with a lot of tilt to it. So they're able to control the ball with that if you are hitting slightly more down with the driver. And I know that's a very vague answer to that, but that can be a very long answer. But yeah, so I would say honestly, there, Tim, that's what I'll look at first. And if you are hitting up on it, and then if you're changing to hit up on it, maybe you are adding a little loft and flipping. But since you said before that you never really struggled until recently, you could be, we can have a point to our spine tilt is too much, right? And so we don't want to have too much spine tilt there on the way down. And also maybe obviously take a look at your weight distribution if you're transferring your weight there into your lead side. So those are the things I would look for without actually seeing your swing there, Tim. Those are the things I would look for, and also take a look at to see if you are flipping. You could be, to be honest with you. Right? So hopefully I helped you out there, Tim. Let me know how it goes. All right. So Thomas asks, I always thought a full shot shank was caused by hips spinning. However, Clay's video says that it's caused by hips not turning early enough. Please advise. I always start from the other websites that shank was caused by early spinning out of the hips. However, Clay says that it was caused by the hips not turning early enough. Okay, so I'm just going to say it again. So the shank could be happening. Typically, to be honest with you, a shank does happen on a, I see more often is that the hips are too square their impact. So actually what's happening here, I guess I'll just kind of use my hand. Unfortunately, I don't have an iron in my office right now. But so if I have the golf ball here, and we're going from the down the line view, so if I'm hitting a ball in this direction here behind me, and typically what happens when someone comes over the top, so if you are a slicer of the golf ball and you come over the top, If you look at your driver, more than likely, most of your wear marks are going to be onto your heel. Now, that's just, again, very common. Normally, we see that in beginners where it's going to be more of a heel strike. So if I'm coming over the top, what's normally happening is that my upper body is moving first and not my lower body. So then that's more than likely your hips are going to be too square there, impact. When that's the case, it's like 98% of the time that's what's happening. So again, imagine this fist here is a golf ball. If I'm coming over and atop the plane, and now this part of my hand here is the heel of the club, and this, my fingertips are the toe. If I'm coming over, the club head is working technically outside the ball, right? So now I'm going to swing left. So look what happens there. So now I'm bringing in the heel. So if I go out to left, I'm bringing in more of the heel, which will result into potential shank, right? Or I can come in and you start doing that, then you want to scrunch in, and now we're doing this here. See, that's more of a chicken wing now. So if I'm coming in over the top and I'm doing this and scrunching in, I'm creating a chicken wing. Now I'm bringing that club, the middle of the club face in, somewhat more square. So now it could be into the toe or more in the middle of the face, but it's still an over the top path or out in. So that's typical what we see, right? It's the most common thing I see when it comes to even a shank is actually an over the top path. Well, a lot of people don't know, but then that's where the chicken wing comes into play. So now we're coming over, the upper body's out racing the lower body. So it makes it almost impossible for the hips to be open. So that's why typically we see shank, hips are square, and then over the top path. The other thing that I do see from time to time, not as often, not nearly as often as an over the top path, is that path actually goes too much into out. And that is a thing, right? So again, going back to club face awareness and like TrackMan data, a tour player typically doesn't really want to be swinging more than 1 degree into out. Sometimes you'll see guys who move the ball more, they'll be like a few degrees into out. And so where on the average golfer that I see and I do a lesson, let's say if they slice or they swing too much into out, their numbers can be into the teens. So what I'm getting at is the other way around. Instead of just an over the top path, and we're swinging now too much into out this way. And if we do this motion here, see, I'm early extending and swinging too much into out. If I stay into my posture and don't do this, see, my upper body is moving forward. I'm sorry, my upper body is moving back, but my hips are moving forward and my path is going too much into out. You can see that where, again, club face here, this is a golf ball, can bring in the hosel. See what I'm saying? So that can also result into the shank, but also on the same lines, my lower body is still not getting out of the way in time. So we're spinning out. I spin out of it. So if those are spinning out, I'm like in baseball players, they'll kind of twist and spin the hips wide open. Typically, it's actually a lot more rare that you see a shank. That's more because you're reaching for it now with the arms. If we're spinning out, our hips are going way out of the way, which is, again, super rare in golf, but we do see it. Then you got to reach for the ball. And so where that can be, you're extending your arms too early. And we call that early release this way. And so, yes, it could also potentially result into a shank. Don't get me wrong. That's definitely true. But the more common things that we see, number one is it's actually an over the top path. And again, almost every single time when there's an over the top path, you do not see lower body rotation as far as sequencing wise. They're on the way down happening. So the hips aren't out of the way in time. The same thing within too much into out path when we potentially have a little bit of early extension now happening, but you're kind of keeping your posture in the upper body. So that's why those who early extend and swing too much into out, you also eventually do this. You kind of stand up out of your posture. Now, again, you're reaching for it as well. So that's where it can also result into a shank as well, potentially. Those are the 1 and 2 things that we see. And it's really extremely rare that where I see the spinning out motion create a shank. And again, just through thousands and thousands of lessons that I've done where I don't really see anybody spinning out of it that much, but it definitely can create a shank, but almost every time. Hopefully that gave you a good description that the reason why the hips not rotating causes more of a shank than anything, because everything else is a manipulation, right? So whether the path of the arms or the hands, or whether we're flipping the hands at all. So that's what's causing more of the shank than anything. So Boy, that was tough to say that many times. Say shank, I'll tell you that. That's for sure. All right, so let's go ahead and Robert asks, find the absolute surefire way or device on everyone to create and maintain lag through impact. You'll make a fortune. Yeah, so yeah, I agree. I 100% agree. If there's ever, I always tell people there, Robert, really quick, if there's ever a device out there that you can't mess up as far as a training aid, because that's where like Clay and I and Q and we go through all of these training aids, and trust me, Clay gets a lot of them sent into him all the time, and he pretty much puts them through the ringer and makes sure that he tries to mess it up to see if you can still do things wrong, and almost 100% of them you can. So I'll tell you that if you can create a training aid, yeah, I do agree on lag in shallowing the club, that where you can't also mess it up as far as create a bad habit, then that would 100% be the one for sure. There's no doubt about that. uh, so Rod asks, could you please go through the motion of the right hand from pet the grass to straight line release? That's a great question. So just really quick there, Rod, when we get into the straight line release, there's kind of the two releases, if you remember seeing, is what we call more of a square release and more of a roll release. Where more of a roll release is going to be generally guys who do draw the ball a little bit more, not much, not a crazy amount. Where a more square release is going to be more of a straighter ball flight. So if those who are not familiar with, we say petting the turf, you may have heard the term covering the ball also. Sorry, I'll move my chair here as well. So when I'm coming through in the right hand, I'll just go through the motion of the right hand here. When I'm coming through here, and I'm petting the turf here with the palm of my right hand. So imagine here that your trail hand or right hand is like the club face, right? And so if I'm coming down this way, now really the right hand doesn't fully face down towards the ground. It's more than likely going to be somewhere for most players right about there. So about this angle here. So we're petting the turf here. So what that's happening now is club face is actually trailing behind the hand. So we're having a later release. Of course, by the time we get to impact now, that we have pretty good amount of shaft lean here when we're de-lofting the face and the club face is square roughly. So when we get to the straight line release in transition, as we begin to rotate, so imagine here, think of it as this here. Give me 1 second. There, John, that if imagine that my well, not imagine, my arms are attached to my body and my arms and wrists are all connected together. So what happened is as my body is rotating open and left, technically that path is following the same thing. So arms and hands are following the same motion. So the motion of my hands, so I'm not doing this, so my wrists are out racing my forearms and my chest and my shoulders as I'm rotating, my hands are kind of turning on the same momentum or that same rotation. So now as I get to the straight line release here or wherever that is for most players, I'm rotated there. My arms and hands are connected to here. So it's more of a, how do I say, more of a natural rotation or natural release instead of what we see more often is the hands over rotate, not necessarily flip, but they do this motion because your hands in essence are beating your forearms and they're beating your shoulders. So that's where you hear the term connection. So everything as we rotate open, the hands are also rotating on that same rotation, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. So that's where kind of that transition into the straight line release that's what's happening into that transition. But again, where if you're trying to hit more of a fade to a straight ball, we're still releasing the club. Maybe it's not here to where it's more of a draw to hook, so maybe it's more square. And if we're fading, now it's a little bit more open. So it's all relative to what obviously you're trying to hit there. So I'll stay like a couple minutes longer because I think a couple questions came in here. So right, okay, so just the last one actually here. So Johnny asks, recently I've seen a coach telling a player to keep their left eye on the ball. Have you ever heard this? Yeah, definitely for sure. I have heard that there, Johnny. You know, again, focus, if we're thinking about a right-handed golfer, you keep your left eye on the ball here, then it helps you to feel like you can get a good full turn and you can kind of keep your eye on the ball. So that's where I've heard that term before. Nothing wrong with that by any means. Trying to keep your left eye on the ball. You have to be careful of that, because if I try to do that, in a dress, I could set up to it this way. And it is kind of the Jack Nicklaus that he used to do, but a lot of players, like Jack was obviously an incredible golfer. He had an amazing turn, where your average golfer, if you try to tell that to them, they may, again, just be careful of it. They may begin to reverse pivot this way. So I don't think it's a bad thing by any means, but like everything that we do as far as a tip is concerned, there's always ways to doing it to the wrong way as well. So it's a good thing for sure. And like Jack Nicklaus used to always say, he wished he was left eye dominant so that he can get even that much more of a turn than he did. So I think it's a good question there, Johnny. But just everything's really relative to the person and what that person needs. Okay, so all right, I'm about a minute over. John asks really quick, a struggle with an ability to pause the top of the swing, allow the body to initiate the downswing. Recently saw a video online using the sledgehammer method. The principle is if the hammer is heavy enough, you can start the downswing in a pendulum style. You can't initiate the downswing until the hammer comes at the top, or you might literally hurt yourself. For great muscle memory. Great for muscle memory. On a quick answer here, John, because I do have to get off here for here in a little bit, but think of it again as our downswing starts. Remember, our lower body starts to downswing prior to our backswing completing. So pausing at the top, if you pause here technically at the top, and you may think like Hideki Matsuyama, I kind of said this yesterday, with Hideki, if you watch Hideki in slow motion, the club is actually still moving, except it's very, very slow. So it looks like a pause, but it's actually still moving. So our backswing is still completing. So as we get to the very top, my lower bodies are already starting there until the way down, or beginning that transition. So that's the disassociation. So that's where the momentum, as you go here, lower body goes. Now that hammer, in essence, is being kind of pulled in a way by the transition of our lower body. So hopefully that helps you out there, John. All right. So thanks so much again. Thanks for having me, guys, join you in office hours. I apologize. My video quality isn't as good as Q's, and Q regularly does this, and he will be back on Monday. He's on vacation just for the weekend, a quick vacation, or family's in town, I believe. And but yes, so if you have any questions as far as in-person lessons, online lessons, online meaning the unlimited review part, and the actual online 1 hour lessons, like an actual lesson that I would do on Zoom, which I actually have here in a little bit. You can click on the link in the top there to book, or just send me email, robin@topspeedgolf.com, and then keep a lookout for clinics here in the future. So those are what I do throughout the year. Is I'll do in-persons and clinics throughout the whole year, as well as unlimited review, online lessons, and these online 1 hour lessons. So I appreciate you guys. Thank you very much for having me. And I'm sure I'll see you at some point throughout the future as Q goes on vacation. I think cover for him. So best of luck on your guys' game. Thank you very much. Awesome questions, and I'll talk to you all soon. Take care.